Hi folks, and welcome back to my channel, and in this video we're going to mount the rear clamshell of this Lotus Elise. This Elise is nearing its final completion. All what's going to be left after the rear clamshell is the front clamshell, but this Lotus Elise has gone through quite some changes. I bought it as an economical total loss after I had a severe crash, and we have rebuilt it completely. We replaced the complete front part, including the crash box. That was quite a job to do, but you can see all this on my YouTube channel. We also put up a new radiator shroud and a brand new aluminum radiator. Now, while we had the opportunity, we replaced all the tubing at the radiator with silicone-based tubing. With the clamshell off, it was so easy to rework the complete suspension system. So we had reconditioned shocks, we changed all the bushes on the wishbones, we also changed the ball joint, and we cleaned up the upright over here, and we inserted brand new bearings on every wheel. The ball joints that we put in are special types. They're adjustable types. I did paint them silver because otherwise I'm going to have a problem with the technical control, because they don't like these kind of modifications, because these are racing ball joints. We reconditioned the brake calipers. We put new braking pads in, but most of all we put brand new vented bell discs up. And the brake tubes were also modified, so now we have stainless steel plastic coated brake tube lines. So in the back we did an identical job. We put new discs up, same bell disc. We reconditioned the brake caliper, we put new brake pads up, we reconditioned and replaced all the bushes on the wishbones, and we put new uprights up and new bearings. We installed a brand new manual braking system because that cable was totally corroded, and we replaced all the drive shafts on the left and on the right hand side, and of course the flex hose for the brakes and the tie rod right here. That's a good replacement because that's a weak spot of the Lotus Elise. So I think overall this vehicle is now in a very good condition, and we kind of refurbished the original OZ racing rims that this vehicle had when it was brand new. If you've been watching my channel, guys, on the Lotus Elise, and you will have seen that when we picked up this vehicle, the front part was totally damaged. The front clamshell was gone. The rear clamshell had equal damage, and the whole back side here was ripped apart. And the top of this sill was broken off completely. So we replaced the complete sill, and that's the last video we made actually. By now the sill is on. I remounted all the pieces. We remounted the door, and it all lines up quite nice. So now we are ready for the next step. So I didn't show you how I fitted the door and all this once the sill was in place, but that's not a big job to do. But I fitted all the rubber spag on the window, and inside we also did a lot of work. We put the rubber spag in here because remember, those you have to glue on, and I've shown you that in the previous video that you can use double-sided tape for that. We cleaned up this step here because they tend to go quite dirty very quickly. So now all that is ready, and I'm about ready to put up the new shell. So if you're going to replace a lot of parts on your Lotus Elise, then it's always good to have a set of screws. And this set right here covers all the external fittings, the door fittings, the clamshell fittings, everything that you're going to need to put your car back together. It runs you around 40 euros, but it's worthwhile the money because it's all rust-free material. So all the packages are labeled and described exactly what's inside and for what you're going to use it. Often you'll find a part number on it that you can then refer back to your maintenance manual to identify the right screws, nuts and bolts. And this, guys, is the rear clamshell that we bought second-hand. We repaired it and we painted it in our home-built paint booth. And if you want to see how you can build your own paint booth, then watch my video channel. There's about 4 videos on how we've built this paint booth. But I think the rear clamshell looks quite nice. And now we're going to fit it on the vehicle. Now I'm on my own, so I have to find a way to do this because fitting a clamshell on your own isn't always that easy. Okay, guys. So here's the rear clamshell. I took it out of the paint booth, and now I'm going to lift it up so I can actually put it in place myself the way I need to put it in place. Now you might have noticed that I'm not going to lift it up on my own completely because that's too heavy for me. Well, it's probably not too heavy, but I won't be able to position it right enough, and I can't look on both sides at the same time. If you're with 2 people, it's easier. That's where I'm going to be using this engine lift, and that will just do the job for me. I'm going to make a piece of wood right here in the middle, underneath the boot, so I can lift it up in this area, so I can keep it in balance and do with it whatever I need to do. I can move it up, down, left, right, so that's going to work just fine. So let me make that piece of wood first, because I am quite sure that I will have to do some fiddling on this rear clamshell to get it properly installed onto the vehicle, because it is not the original clamshell of this vehicle. Although it's an original Lotus clamshell, you will have to do some fiddling, put spacers here and there, so don't be surprised if you see me doing that. I might even have to adjust some holes. So let me make that piece of wood and then we carry on. So guys, here's that piece of wood. Nothing really special. And I can just hook it up like so. And you see those small pieces here or over here? They stick out a bit. That's supposed to go against the edge like so. So, you know, it can't slide out all the way. So that should be good. I'm going to put a little piece of cloth on the edges so I don't damage anything. And I'm going to lift it up and see where it brings us. I don't know yet where the exact balance point is, but we'll find out. It does look like it's balanced right, so we need to shift it a bit. That's better balanced, but it seems like it's hanging down a bit, so I need to move it a bit more backward. So never throw away your old clamshell, even if it's badly damaged. Keep it until the end, because there's always little parts that you're going to need on this clamshell to be fitted on your replacement clamshell. There's little attachments, it's like rubbers, all kind of little stuff. In fact, on this one I need to take off the lights because I don't have lights on the other one, so it's always good to keep it. It's like the rubber in the trunk. If you have to buy these parts, they are not cheap. Lotus is quite expensive. And it doesn't always have to be big parts. They could sometimes be very small parts as well. But there we go. Make sure that this seal is still intact, and it is. So let's have a look on the lights, because I will need to recover those. But it seems like somebody had glued them in a bit, because I undid the nuts in the back, there are two nuts in the back, and I can't get them out. So I will actually have to cut them out, and then once I have them out, I will try to get them off the remaining part of the clamshell. So let me cut around this thing and then try to pull it out. I think that should be working just fine. There we go. Let me pull it out. I got it off finally, and yes, indeed, it had it glued a bit, not too much, but they had a bit of glue on it, and that's why I couldn't get them out. And I didn't want to break them, so I'd rather break the shell than anything else, because that clamshell is gone anyway. So here we go. We'll clean them up, and then we'll fit them on the new shell. Before we put the rear clamshell on, we'll be mounting these rubbers on the side and the intake fence, and that's not that hard to do. In fact, there's only a screw or two. There we go. I think that looks good. Just got to make sure everything is in place, and then I actually had to cut out some of the lights because somebody glued them in, but that's now all done. And on the side, you have these little kind of wings or grill, and that's glued in, so that you cannot recover normally. But if you're careful, you can cut it out and remove it. Let me show you. And this is one of those little grills that are on the sides on the rear taillights, and I painted it in aluminum zinc color because I think it's going to fit nicely with the logo in the back of the vehicle. And you can actually see that they were glued in before. So I cleaned it up a bit so now I can glue them back in. So let's see how it looks like once it's fitted in. No, I think that looks quite good. I was able to get the lights out of the old shell without any damage, and I mounted them now in the new shell and they look pretty good. So we are about ready to mount the shell onto the car, and I'm just going to jack it out, remove the table, and then we can push it forward. Now the ribbons that you see is nothing more than tape to keep it in place so it can't turn left or right. So that way I can keep it a bit in balance. So now let's just move it forward and we're going to slide it over gently over to the vehicle. Now you got to take your time, guys, and really check it out. Go back and forth, check left, check right, keep checking, and then slowly and certainly keep lowering it and keep making double checks. You might see that wooden piece in there on the top. That's just to keep it better in place. And I went back and forth a couple of times to check on the left, to check on the right, because you want to have it fit nicely onto your sill. You don't want to push anything, you don't want to force anything. Just take your time and make sure everything fits just nice and flush. And at the end you will get it. That's exactly how I did it. It took me probably about 15 minutes to do this. So you've seen how easy it is to mount a clamshell with a motor lift. It went on very smoothly. It fits quite good, and I'll show you a few details in a minute. Now all what's left is actually to bolt it down. And I didn't intend initially to show you on how to bolt down the clamshell once it's in place. But because some people did ask me, I'm going to show it to you anyhow, and you can skip this part if you want to, but maybe it is of interest to you. It's not very difficult to follow because there's only a couple of bolts that you have to put in. So let's start. The best way to install the rear clamshell and bolting it down is by removing the rear wheel, and then you have access to the inside. Now normally here you would have an inner fender, but of course that is not here for the moment. But now you have access to the back of this panel, and that's where the clamshell fits with the sill. There are two bolts in the back. It's not easy to show you, but that's where the two bolts are, and you can get easy access to it from the inner wheel arch. You have this on the left and on the right. The next area are the longerons on the left and on the right, and this is the longeron. That's where the clamshell is sitting on, and you might have to put spacers like this underneath this. As you can see right here, that would actually fit. So you need to have different sets of spacers, plastic spacers, to put underneath. The bolts have been put in from the inside of the trunk, and I'll show you that in a second. And inside you find the bolts that are holding down the clamshell to the longerons. You also have two bolts where the hinges are for the engine cover. There's one on the left and one on the right, and that's what is bolting down the clamshell to the inner bulkhead. And this is the rear window shroud that I placed inside the cockpit, and these are the bolts that I need to feed through the rear clamshell, and that's why I need to drill holes for it. And right here you typically have the shroud connecting to the clamshell, and you see I have a hole here and there's a bigger hole on the other side, but my shroud actually, as you have seen before, has a single bolt that should go in here, around here somewhere, so I have to drill a new hole. And obviously we'll have to fit the ring around the gas tank, but before I can do that I have to take the stop off, and then I can mount this ring back on there. Now this is the original rear clamshell, and you see we don't have this big hole here, nor do we have a hole here, but we have one hole over there. That's where my shroud is fitting on my old clamshell. So now in the new clamshell we'll have to drill a hole in exactly the same space. So what I've used is some tape, and I'm going to use this tape as a mask, and I will put it back on the new shell, and then we just go in to drill the holes. So the rear window shroud is now on, and I actually drilled the holes with a small bit, and then I used the bigger bit, guys. Unfortunately, I didn't have my camera on. That was kind of stupid from me. Camera was still on standby. Nevertheless, I used the masking tape. I peeled it off the old shell and placed it on the new shell, and I just drilled the holes where the markings were, and that's how simple that was. Nothing much special. We're all done. We mounted the rear clamshell on the Lotus Elise. It wasn't that hard. We looked at all the bolts and all the fittings. Of course, there's still a bit of work to be done. We still have to put in the inner wheel arches. We still have to put the license plate panel up. We still have to put the diffuser up, some small grills on the side. There's a lot of small things still to be done. We still have to put in the engine lid on top of it. So still a bit of work, and that's coming in my next video on how we're going to wrap this up, because my diffuser that was on this vehicle is totally damaged, so I'm going to repair it with some new aluminum panels, and you'll see that on how we're going to form and bend that new diffuser panel instead of buying a new one. So I hope you enjoyed it, and give me a thumbs up if you liked it. Give me a thumbs down if you didn't like it, but then please let me know why you didn't like it. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye bye and have a great day.